The mysterious guy, who seems to be willing to help you, but always is suspicious. Before we start discussing his identity, keep in mind that the video has a lot of spoilers. And some of the information isn't even available in the game itself. Also, note that this video will mention two characters, who define themselves as Shadow's descendants. This picture will be used to define the player, or Shadow's descendant, who does good things, who tries to save the world. But again, who is this stranger? Different characters define Stranger's origins in various ways. To find out his true identity, we have to look at them and make a whole picture of him. Let's start with Stranger himself. What does he tell about his own identity? At first, he keeps saying that he's a time traveler who conducts researches. In June's plane, he says he's there to help the player in their journey. In Itu's plane, he reveals to be the real Shadow's descendant, and that the player is just a copy of him. A second thought on who Stranger is comes from May. After she is able to reach Shadow, as well as Shadow Mind, she tells that there is no real Shadow's descendant for now. That's just for now, but the time will decide which one of billions of copies will be the real Shadow's descendant. She also tells that it's Shadow Mind's choice to believe in either of these descendants. So according to her, Stranger is another copy of Shadow's descendant. Third description of Stranger's origins is told by Nemos. He tells that Stranger is a shadow of the true descendant. There always was the real Shadow's descendant, Proximus, while Stranger is his copy who was corrupted by Shadow World before he even was born. The forces and energy of the Shadow World lured him, and made him think that the Shadow World is his homeland and that he's Titan's successor. What did the developers tell about Stranger? The question about his origins was asked, and during a Q&A, on their official VK page they told that Stranger isn't alive, nor is he dead. He also probably never was born. As the developers say, he is a mere probability of existence. A widely spread belief among the players is that Stranger is evil part of the descendant, while Proximus is a good part. Also, a canon part of the storyline can explain a lot. In Chapter 6 of Shadow Fight 3 storyline, Bolo explains how impossible it is to not let Shadow get the accelerator prototype. They try to prevent Shadow destroying the world, however all the efforts are useless and no matter what they do, Shadow gets the prototype in any scenario. But, during these 3 time travels, there definitely appeared copies of Shadow's descendant, Proximus, who was the one to travel back in time. And Stranger could have appeared during that time as a side effect from these jumps. This explains how he got to the crypt when young Bolo discovered him there in the distant past. Let's connect the dots. Neki said that Stranger isn't even real, he's a mere probability of existence. Which means he's probably a copy of the real descendant. Nemos said that he was corrupted by Shadow World, so when his probability of existence exceeded 0, or to put it simply, when Proximus, the real descendant, traveled into the past, and caused Stranger to appear, his destiny was predetermined. The evil and hatred got into him and made him desire power, and open the gates, so that he could return to Titan's world, thinking he's the successor of Titan. The Shadow World's evil was to affect Shadow's descendant anyway, but Stranger saved Proximus, taking this curse. This would explain why people consider Stranger as bad part of the descendant, and Proximus the good part of him. This explanation very well fits with everyone who told their thoughts on Stranger. Now, let's talk about Stranger's life. As Descendant travels in time in Chapter 6, he accidentally creates his own copy in another timeline. This copy, Stranger starts traveling back in time, using Bolo's suit to explore the history, conduct research and study everything. His identity, in fact, has been spoiled back at the time Yolanda meets the player. She mistakes him for being Bolo. Shadow's descendant, Proximus, was wearing a special suit, which he received from Bolo, to be able to travel in time. This may have been a clue from the devs. How Stranger has Bolo's suit and can travel in time, being a copy of Descendant in Bolo's suit. Even in June's plane, in a nightmare dream, June says Stranger looks like Bolo, and even speaks like a scholar, also similar to Bolo. It's worth noting how this guy on his own came with the index of historic importance. Imagine how much time it took him to come up with something this crazy. He wasn't particularly strong, but rather very intelligent. This is why he knew he stood no chance against Shadow in the beginning, so he convinced Proximus to defeat him, try his hardest. In the best case scenario, Stranger becomes stronger than Shadow. In the worst, as Stranger predicted, Proximus would be stomped, but Stranger himself would stay alive. His talent also can be seen in the fact that at the time, when neither Bolo, nor any smart scientist, no dynastian, even ancient, couldn't really understand how Shadow Mind works, this dude just discovered the ways Shadow Mind affect the world. One cleansing of the world by shadow was enough for him to realize that shadow mind cannot be destroyed. Not to mention how he figured out the way to stay alive after the cleansing and reach the bridge between the timelines. He also was smart enough to hide his identity. Notice that no one could tell who he is until he confessed on his own that he's Shadow's descendant. He convinced everyone that he's a godlike entity who can predict and control everything. After the famous battle of Proximus and his dad, Shadow, Stranger is alive somehow, even if it was supposed to destroy the entire world with the accelerator explosion. Stranger tells the player that he's there to help them. He explains that after the explosion of the world with the accelerator that Shadow built, player has become much weaker. During the timelines that the player fights to find Shadow Mind, Stranger gradually gains strength. As soon as Proximus, without knowing themselves, makes Stranger strong enough to defeat Shadow. Stranger doesn't wait and reveals his identity. He's Shadow's true descendant. As he says, Proximus is just a copy, and has fulfilled its purpose of life by helping Stranger. Proximus still can continue grinding for their own consciousness, as Stranger says how rare it is to have an opportunity to live in this universe. Stranger heads to the crypt. Bolo and Stranger meet again. They remember how they had previously met in the past. Remember the theory on Stranger's origins regarding Chapter 6 of the story? This was their first encounter. Or so you might think. Stranger says that it was Itu who told Shadow everything that Stranger wanted Shadow to know. However, Bolo, who turns out to be actually Itu who stomped the real Bolo and pretended to be him, says that the real Bolo was the one to do so. After Stranger pretends to lose in a fight against Bolo, or the real Itu. Stranger says that he wanted the latter to decode May's message. Stranger also wanted Shadow to find out about time travels and Shadow Mind's power. Who knows? Maybe Stranger had a little bit of a desire to cooperate with Shadow. Maybe he wasn't that bad at the beginning. But after the encounter with old Bolo or the real Itu, Stranger says while there is no real Shadow's descendant, Stranger's pawns, Bolo, Itu, Proximus and other copies, made Stranger stronger than Shadow and flees. At this point, Stranger has traveled in time so many times, and his copies made him so much stronger that his index of historic importance has risen to unbelievable heights. In Marcus's plane, Stranger is already called the Master of the Worlds. Shadow can't stop him, and there isn't anyone who is capable of defeating him. Note that if before Scourge and the Shadow disease scared everybody, Stranger is now easily controlling it, as if it's nothing. Lieutenant Siegfried and his liquidator squad now becomes a group of shadow beasts. The dead are revived, even the King of the Legion. Stranger is so powerful now, not only he can resurrect the dead, but also control them to fulfill his plans. What does King of the Legion do there? You can watch the video about him. Also, the guy who is called Master in that video is Stranger. It references him being the Master of the Worlds. In the plane of Gates of Shadows, Shadow dies instead of May. You can imagine it this way: in the original timeline, Shadow wanted to protect May from the Shadow Mind and accidentally hit her too hard. But in this timeline, Shadow Mind is fully controlled by Stranger. Proximus is gone, his existence was terminated. Shadow dies instead of May in this timeline. May mourns over a stone, which resembles Shadow's grave. Stranger offers May to lead his troops. But May refuses, telling she would rather die. The fight between Stranger and his mother takes place. May stands no chance against someone this powerful. However, Stranger spares May's life. She also still loves her son, and says he must stop, otherwise the Gates of Shadows will devour him. But he doesn't listen. Meanwhile, Proximus was brought to life from seemingly impossible conditions. In fact, reviving him is much harder than reviving the dead. Shadow, for example, could be easily resurrected with shadow energy, similar to King of the Legion, but Proximus' revival is truly a miracle. Bringing back to life someone who existed as a probability in another timeline is something not seen even in a science fiction, but this video doesn't focus on that topic. If you are really curious about that event, I can make a video about it, of course. By the way, if you enjoy watching the videos, you should definitely leave a like and subscribe so you won't miss more lore videos. You can also support the creation of content by donating, or checking out the games I develop. The link for both is in the description of the video. Stranger is about to open the Gates of Shadows, however he's shocked to see Proximus. He can't believe his eyes. Stranger says it's impossible to revive Proximus, it in fact contradicts the laws of nature. May replies that miracles do not obey the laws of nature. After a long battle, Stranger is defeated by Proximus. In the last attempt, Stranger tries to absorb all the power from the gates, however being unable to endure such power, he is about to vanish. May approaches her son, but Stranger is furious. May tells Proximus not to defend her, she is ready even to take hit, just to be closer to her son. Stranger couldn't beat his mom, and as a farewell, he hugs her and disappears as dust.